Hello, my name is James Trost, and this is A2 Insight. Our program focuses on issues relevant to the Ann Arbor community. Today's guest is Jaime Magiera. Mr. Magiera grew up in Downriver, Detroit, and attended the St. Francis Catholic Grade School. He graduated from the University of Michigan with a Bachelor of Music in Performing Arts Technology. In the past 13 years, he's worked for the University of Michigan as a system administrator. And in addition to a variety of volunteer activities, Mr. Magiera hosts a weekly science and technology radio show on WCBN entitled, I believe that's Interactive Technology, thank you. Currently, he is running for the Ann Arbor City Council in the 4th Ward. Jaime Magiera, welcome to A2 Insight.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you here.
Enjoy this.
Why don't you start out by giving us a little bit more information about your background?
Sure. So I essentially grew up in the Downriver area, so that's Lincoln Park, Allen Park, Wyandotte, Groseal area, and moved to Ann Arbor actually when I was 16 because I wanted to participate in the very progressive culture. At the time, there were a lot of bookstores, record stores, the types of things that make Ann Arbor unique, and really interesting. So I moved here, was very active in the music scene and the art scene, and also had a newspaper that I was publishing, a little independent newspaper. And then ended up going to the University of Michigan and getting my degree in performance arts technology, which essentially is using technology in an interactive way to be expressive with music, video, and dance, and all the different disciplines mixed together. And so I've always had sort of a political background with my involvement with various organizations, worked for Greenpeace, and have been involved in things with housing and whatnot. And essentially started really watching the city politics and watching how those play out, and decided that after being for many years on the periphery of the political process itself, being more independent, getting involved with the process directly and running for council.
Well, again, I guess that's it. Can you tell us about your run for council? Apparently this isn't your first time, but...
That's right. So I ran in 2015, and that was a great experience. I had a good chance to meet a lot of residents in the 4th Ward and throughout the city, and managed to, I think, make my case very well. I went up against the incumbent, got 40% of the vote, and did that utilizing a very small amount of money compared to the other candidates. And to me, those were measures of success. And I didn't win, but I learned a lot and made some great connections, and I think it prepped me for this next run. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. What is it like to run for a city council? I mean, what kind of things you do? Is it what they say, go to door? I mean,
yeah, so let me tell you about this, because this is actually kind of an interesting thing. For people that aren't familiar with the process, essentially, to get on the ballot even, you have to get 100 signatures from residents within that ward. So I'm in the 4th Ward. So that meant going door to door and stating my case to residents as to why I should be on the ballot. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're voting for me. It just means that they feel that there should be options. So there's that process of getting the 100 signatures, and not everyone that signs is necessarily going to be a valid voter in that ward. So you always have to get a buffer. Then you turn in those signatures, and then begins the process of actually submitting financial paperwork to the county, and then just knocking doors, coming up with literature to pass out at the doors, mailers, things that you mail out to people, making phone calls, sending emails, attending community events, a variety of things to connect with the voters and find out what's on their mind, what they're thinking about. And I have a little bit of an advantage in the media area because I do website design and programming, and I have a silkscreen press, and I have a button press, and I have all these things that actually I can do a lot of my campaign materials myself and the design of my campaign materials and the website. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like an interesting experience to be going door to door in the community,
Yes, I enjoy it.
which I hope would obviously give you a great insight into some of the concerns that residents of Ann Arbor, particularly in the Fourth Ward, have. And so that leads me to, well, what do you think are the issues confronting this community, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, so I view representation of a council member, of a council member that a council member has for residents, as being sort of an onion with two layers, basically, or multiple layers. But the two that I really have gotten to know in talking to residents are the outer layer, which is sort of the city in general, and how things change and move forward over time, right? How businesses come and go, how housing changes, and storefronts, and we'll be talking about the Georgetown area and things like that. That's sort of the outer layer, sort of the big picture stuff. The inner layer of this onion that you really get a sense of when you talk to residents is what's happening right outside their front door, what's happening in their backyard, what's happening on a day-to-day basis where government, local government, interconnects with their lives, or even state government, county government, federal government, how that connects with their daily lives from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. Things that have to do with the quality of their water, things that have to do with trash pickup and recycling, street sweeping, the quality of the roads. And so running for council and eventually representing people on council, I think, is balancing those two layers and being able to address those immediate needs that residents have, whether it be the development down the street or be the quality of the roads or issues with trees getting trimmed and whatnot. And then doing that in such a way that it is what they call sustainable, so that in the big picture we can keep on providing these services for residents. And manage the change. So all cities grow and contract a little bit. And you want to be able to maintain the level of services for residents while we go through that growth and that contraction.
Well, that sounds encouraging. I have to have a personal confession. I do live in the Fourth Ward, and I have lived in this community on and off since 1969. And the constant issue I would continually say is, what are you going to do about those potholes? I know this has been a concern. I realize it's a climate issue, but I've also known that the city has kind of shortchanged these things, waiting for yet the next year to fill in the pothole, which lasts about a month and it goes on. And I know that you hear everything from people when you're walking around, but this is a continuing problem that I've known since I was 6 years old, moved to this town. Is there a solution to this? Is it just a reality of finances? There's no way to fix these potholes.
I think there is a way to fix them. So, or a couple ways that we can fix them. So, one of the things which people don't want to really talk about very much is the financing aspect of it, because there's a lot of things that the city wants to do. There's a lot of services that need to be provided, and we need to balance those things out. So I think one of the things we need to do is allocate more money towards the roads. And people also need to have a sense of what roads are local. There's actually 3 categories of roads. So we need to make it clear what roads we do have control of to residents. And I think that that's an important thing. So in terms of funding, getting that funding shifted over. There's discussion of a millage. I would have to see what that looks like before I would support anything of that nature. I think residents provide a lot of taxes right now to the city. So I think it would be a question more of balancing what we have first. The other aspect of it is the components that go into the degradation of the road. We have a flooding issue flooding issues in a lot of parts of the city. We have areas where there's a lot of flowing water, and where there's been a lot of deposits of salt. And these things all contribute towards the degradation of the roads. So what I would like to see are some of the technologies that are out there, some of the systems that are available to mitigate flooding. So you're helping residents by mitigating the flooding, and you're also preventing that water from rushing through and breaking down the pavement over time. And these have to do with retention, gardens, a lot of different things that different cities are trying. And we've dabbled in some of those, but I don't think we've designed a plan to basically go through neighborhoods and say, okay, how can we improve this neighborhood so that every time there is a rainstorm, they don't get flooding, at the end of their street or in front of their own house or in the front of their property. So to me, those two things go hand in hand. I had a resident that I was talking to just a couple weeks ago mention, I asked my usual question. I said, what stands out in your mind that you want to see addressed? And he walked out onto his porch and he said, that's what I want to see addressed. And sure enough, lots of broken up pavement and potholes. And that's really, it's unacceptable for residents to be putting themselves at risk, whether they're driving, whether they're biking, or whether they're walking down the ramps and through the streets and up onto the sidewalks. Sidewalks are also affected by the water. So I think that that's something we have to address, not just for the damage it does to your cars and whatnot and to your bikes, but also just for public safety. Sure. I think it's an important issue.
Well, and again, as they say, all politics are local.
Yeah, for sure.
But, and as I said, the only person who seems to benefit from this yearly occurrence is my auto mechanic, as
right.
I'm paying for another wheel alignment. But let's move on to some more serious issues as they relate to the city and try to distinguish you from your opponent
Sure.
in the upcoming primary here on the 4th Ward. And for residents not familiar, maybe you could enlighten us a little bit concerning the issue of the library lot in Ann Arbor. This has been an issue with many issues in Ann Arbor that never seems to be resolved and continually comes on and it never ends. But would you explain what this is to our audience and what the distinction is between your position on this issue as it relates to your challenger?
Sure.
Or the current councilman?
Sure, exactly. So a little bit of history on this. So the library lot has been a surface parking lot for many, many years. And in fact, when I was going through college, I worked for National Garages, the company that managed the park at the time, managed the parking lots, and that was actually my lot. I was actually in the little toll booth that used to be right there for a couple of years. And so I got to know that lot very well and the community around it. And years back, the city voted that they wanted to sell that property and develop it for the purpose of, at the time, what was going to be sort of like a multi-use building, hotel, and then at the same time, the underground area, what they now call Library Lane, was developed. So there's now an underground parking structure that you enter from right in front of the library there, right next to the post office, I should say. You go down underneath and there's parking there. And then there's also this surface lot up above that underground parking structure. There's varying opinions about what to do with that. So a group of folks involved with the Ann Arbor Democrats, which I'm actually on the executive board of the Ann Arbor Democrats, years back approached that group about petitioning the city to make that a public park. And then that came around again as the city began to get more proposals in the past 2 years. The group who wanted a lot, wanted a park, began approaching the city again. And then they tried to get signatures to get the park, the question of having a park on that space put on the ballot. They fell short in terms of collecting those signatures. Just a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago today actually, City Council voted to sell the land rights to Core Spaces, who was one of the proposals. It originally started out with 12 proposals, was whittled down to 5, I think it was, and then 3, and then this current one with Core Spaces. One of the interesting things is that if you look at the surrounding area, it doesn't quite lend itself to a park in the traditional sense. So that's one of my concerns. If you look to the west, you have basically the road, the entranceway to the post office. If you go to the east, there is Division with this row of houses. To the south is the library. And to the north are a couple of old houses, and then the backs of the buildings along that stretch of Liberty. And so I've done a lot of research into urban planning. I'm a little bit of a urban planning and sustainability wonk. And one of the things that they found is whenever parks are developed, the parks need to have a stream of people walking by with the intention of going in and out of the park and other places surrounding, facing inward into it. So for example, in New York, they've built a lot of different parks, and they found that only the ones in which there was activity facing inward did people want to go to the park. Otherwise, they felt sort of isolated and pushed out from it. And so that's a concern of mine. Another concern of mine is that funding for this park and the programming would have to be done by the city itself. So instead of making the tax money from the property, we would be having to come up with the money to maintain the property and maintain the programming on it. So that's another concern. Now the flip side of this, and I think that the thing that differentiates myself, one of the many things that differentiate myself from my opponent in the council race is that my focus now that the council has made the vote is to make that building that's going to be there as sustainable as possible. And people will ask, well, what does sustainable mean? I see that thrown around a lot. The initial definition, the original definition of sustainability came from the World Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. And it essentially means developing things so that we meet the needs currently in our community, while at the same time we don't diminish the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So this building is going up, and although the proposal says that it would be to a LEED standard, the standard that they talk about is old, and they actually don't talk about the building being certified to that standard of environmental sustainability. That concerns me. Another thing that concerns me is that there is no use of solar power, rainwater reuse, or anything like that in the proposal that are the types of things that, in my mind, if we're going to use such a significant footprint of our downtown and have such a significant project, a big project, it should represent our values in terms of the environment and in terms of sustainability. Another thing that I think is lacking in that proposal is there's nothing mentioned about urban gardens. So this is something other communities are doing. Detroit is doing it, Chicago. The gist is, whenever you have an urban space, provide for people to have gardens on rooftops, on terraces, and whatnot. And that allows people to supplement their food and improve their health, while at the same time dealing with some of the rainwater and minimizing the rain runoff down into the streets. And also giving people a sense of place, a sense of some beauty other than just a concrete structure.
Sure. Well, and that's interesting, but again, for a citizen of the community, we've had 12 proposals, now we're down to one. This one doesn't suit the needs. These projects seem to go on forever and never get resolved. And we can't resolve it here, but I do want to move on to yet another project, which is, of course, much more in my own backyard and has been yet another one of these endless non-completion projects, and that would be what was called Packard Square, which, for those of you not familiar with this, used to be called the Georgetown Mall. It was demolished, and then we were building what was supposedly some apartments and other things, and it's still not completed. And again, this is yet another, at least this one's being built on, so it's not just in the discussion phase. Could you tell our audience a little bit about Packard Square, where it's at, and where you see that maybe being completed in this century or whatever?
Sure. So Packard Square, basically as you go down Packard further south, you will come across this area that it used to have a Kroger and a variety of other businesses that served the neighborhood. And there was a big promise that there would be a new development there. They closed the grocery store, closed the other things to make way for this new development. The development got so far as basically having the exterior walls and fundamental structure put up, and then that was about it. And this is, right across the street from several residents, that they have to look at this every day. And it's not contributing to the community right now in any fashion. So just a couple months ago, it was announced that a local developer was going to be taking over the project in terms of managing it and getting it done. And that is slated to be started in, I believe, spring of 2018, that things will actually start getting work done again. And I think that we're in a situation where we have to learn from our mistakes on this. We should have vetted that developer better. There were concerns voiced early on that developer had started projects that were not completed. And I think we need to really listen to residents in that area when they say, we need something done. And there could have been, I think, some temporary measures taken to improve the space just so it wasn't so much of an eyesore and a danger, because you don't want kids running around and playing in that area, et cetera. So I think being responsive to residents when things go wrong is an important factor. And I don't think that we really had, I don't think we were active enough in addressing residents. And that was something that I got the sense for when I walked through that area talking to residents, is they felt that they had been abandoned, just like that building, basically.
Well, I can tell you as a resident in that area, I'm more concerned about the decision-making process that led to apparently the developer that completed the project. But again, I appreciate your update on it. But it does lead to something that I think most people who are townies, if you want to call us, that, this, and again, we would be a Saline, we'd be a Chelsea or a Dexter if it wasn't for the fact that the University of Michigan is here. However, it seems to me that whether it be the old Pfizer project or the Edwards Brother printing press that apparently is being built for a new gymnastics center, I believe our taxes are quite high, and yet we seem to always cave in to the university, and they don't pay nothing. Now, as I said, we need to have the university. I love having there's a vibrancy that comes there, but is there any project in the future or any land in this community that is either going to be developed by a private entity that will pay some form of taxes, or is everything going to go back to the U of M?
I think we're in a situation where some things have been ruled out. So for example, there's a process that other cities have tried where basically a university will give money in lieu of taxes to the local government there. The new president flat out said, we're not going to do that. So that's sort of off the table for right now. In terms of working with the city, just last year, the city started to send a representative to the capital improvements project meetings with the city. So the university is now sending a representative to those meetings and getting involved with planning and having some input, and us being able to bounce ideas off of them in terms of things that we want to do in the city. I see cooperation as the way to do this. I think it's convenient politically for some people to say that we would have a sort of a predatory relationship with the university. I don't see that as working. They're enshrined in the Constitution of our state, and there's some certain things that are there that we cannot change. So I think cooperation is the way. Having them come to those project meetings, working on transit projects with them, which there are some coming down the pipe, I think those are the ways to do it. I think that the university right now has been expanding, and as I said before, all things expand and eventually contract a little bit. I don't see that the university is going to continuously grow, and I think that they realize that as well. And I think that they can be a little bit smarter about the way that they do things. They've been sort of updating some of their buildings down on Central Campus, for example, to try to get more in the space that they have. And so I think working with them to improve those things are the way forward on that.
Well, that's encouraging, but as I said, it is an issue that those of us who are living here, and I mean, again, I don't want them to go, but I don't see that there's ever it usually is a one-way street, and I think
Yeah.
that would be an opinion that most residents share.
Sure.
But let's move beyond that and then kind of, let's assume that in the upcoming primaries on August 8th that you're able to be victorious in your upcoming race. Where do you see Ann Arbor, or where are you going to lead us as a community, and where do you see us in 10 years?
Yeah. I want to lead the people where they want to go, basically, or help them get to where they want to go. I think that leadership in the case of representation in the city is about allowing the people to say what they want and the representative finding ways in which to get those things done. In 10 years from now, what I would love to see is improved walkability in the city, improved roads and design of our roads so that pedestrians and bicyclists and drivers are all safe. So all of those modes of transportation and mass transit all have to work together. And I think that we need to improve the ways in which these things commingle in our city. And this, bouncing back to the library lot, one of the concerns that I have is right now, that area surrounding the lot doesn't work very well in terms of transit for anybody. People crossing mid-block, cars backed up trying to drop off things at the library, etc. So I think we need to find these sort of trouble spots in the city and improve them. I would like, within 10 years, to see that we've really embraced things to manage stormwater and improve the environmental aspects of our community to where we do have gardens in places where ordinarily we would just see plain buildings.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And whatnot. I would like to see refined city services. So, residents really care about, again, that layer on the inside of how does it affect me every day, what's outside my front door. Using technology and information to improve the city services, whether it be the garbage trucks, recycling, whatever, finding ways to make those as efficient as possible. And on my radio show, actually, each week, I talk about the ways in which technology and data are used to improve city services. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to go in that direction. And improve communication and transparency. Some residents have voiced to me that they felt like they were not responded to by our local government, or that they felt information was being kept from them. And I want to find a way to sort of bridge that communication so that it is free-flowing, and that so residents really feel like their government is responsible for them. Yeah.
Well, we certainly would all like to have that. We're kind of nearing the end of our program here, and
Sure.
what I'd like to ask you now is, you're actually looking for the residents of the 4th Ward's vote as their next councilman, and I'd like you to then try to make a distinction between you and the current councilman as to why they should vote for you as opposed to the sitting councilman Eaton.
Right.
And I'll let you make your pitch.
So again, my name is Jaime Magiera, and I would like to represent residents of the 4th Ward and the city as a whole. Because as I said, I have a lot of background in technology, information, and studying urban planning and different things that are the components that make a great city. And to differentiate myself from my opponent, I would say that one of the things you need is someone who's effective and someone who's able to get things done for residents. And some of that involves building bridges and having solutions that take into account everyone's perspectives, whether it's the library lot where you have multiple perspectives. Some people want no development, they want a park. Some people want some development, some people like the proposal as it is. How do you bridge all of those perspectives and get something that means, that is valuable to the entire community? And I think that I have the ability to provide solutions, do a lot of research, do a lot of legwork to come up with ways in which we can improve our communication as a community and get solutions that work for us as a whole. I think that City Council has been painted as sort of a black and white, these two factions going against each other, and my opponent always portrays himself as, as the counter to this other faction. I would rather not view it as factions at all. I would rather be someone who deals with each council member individually, deals with the information individually, and deals with residents individually. And so I think that that's another asset that I have. I don't fall into any of these camps that have been defined in the political scene. And lastly, my ability to communicate to people just walking every day and talking to them. It's really amazing to go door to door and have these ongoing conversations with people that I had, just months ago, years ago, and whatever. And I have the ability to remember information from these residents and keep their desires in my mind and factor that into the things that we need for our city.
Well, as usual, we're running out of time. I'd like to thank you, Jaime Magiera, and I would like to let you all know that if you're interested in learning more about the positions, the issues, and maybe volunteering for Jamie's campaign, at the end of our show we will have his website so you can learn more about his position on the various issues that are confronting our community and his ways and ideas to try to resolve them. Again, for A2 Insight, I'm James Trost. Until next time.